This is a volumetric display that I built.
Me. Shut up, you're slow. This is a volumetric display and it can display 3D models in real 3D space. My main goals with this project was to create a display that can display static 3D models, does it in a cool way, and costs a cheap AliExpress price because I'm going to have to pay for college soon. Also, this is a school project, so I'd like to get it done before June. This all started about a year ago where I saw this video by Dan Foisey. He used changes in air pressure created by an array of what's basically tiny speakers to make a light particle move around really fast and create visuals by illuminating the particle. This video sent me down a rabbit hole of volumetric displays, going as far back as the ancient year of 2010.
In this video, we demonstrate a set of multi-finger gestural interactions with a three-dimensional volumetric display.
So there's actually three types of volumetric displays: ray, wave, and point displays. Ray and wave displays are basically Star Wars and are either going to make me broke or give me radiation sickness. So we're doing point displays. Point displays work by producing or reflecting light from a point where you want to show something. The simplest version of this is just a cube of LEDs, but like, where's the fun in that? You don't even have to wear eye protection or wake up your family while running it. You know, in times like these, this could be safety glasses. Now, to the untrained eye, it may look like I'm just moving around a phone camera, and well, that's because I am. But if I do this really fast, our eyes perceive a shape created by the moving light. This is called a free space display, and this is what Dan Foisey used in his VDAPT. VDATP. Now, unlike him, I wasn't able to graduate from Hogwarts. Fireball. Instead, I'll be making a different kind of point display, called a swept surface display. Now, this is basically just the same thing, but instead of one or more individual points, we just move around an entire 2D surface really quick. One of my favorite displays I found on the internet is this little guy. Look at it, it's so cute. I thought this was pretty cool and it looked simple enough that I could build one. Now, it did seem kind of small and low resolution to me, so I looked on AliExpress in search of a better LED matrix, and instead found Now that sunk cost fallacy has officially begun kicking in, it's time to get started. Just kidding, the next step is to get distracted by a robotic competition for several months and put the LED matrix on the robot instead so you can rickroll your opponents and do a little sploosh when you hit things. Okay, now we're ready to get started. Psych, there's a second competition too! Okay, surely now I can get started on the— Nope, your team has to very quickly build an eye track and controlled wheelchair for Samsung, so they give us money, and you're the only experienced robotics programmer. Okay, now that everything's done, we actually have time to work on this. Let's see how much time I have left. Well, time to speedrun. So we're making a spinning swept surface display here, so I need to decide on the speed to aim for. Reading the hypothetical data transfer rate of this LED matrix, and hoping for a refresh every 2 degrees, I aim for about 500 RPM since that should be more than slow enough for the display to keep up and be a nice round number. Now, unlike the tiny display by Mixila, I didn't want mine to have a battery on board. Instead, I wanted to be able to just plug it into the wall. This ended up being an immense challenge because how do you route wires into a spinning display? The answer is a slip ring. A slip ring allows you to route wires from a non-spinning base to a spinning top. This is a slip ring from my first attempt to assemble this, but it has a bit of ripped plastic parts glued onto it, but it still works just fine. A slip ring like this has multiple rings in the base that make contact with pins or brushes attached to the spinning section, allowing us to maintain electrical contact throughout the whole rotation. Now, these contacts get worn down with constant use, so over time the connection might get worse, making me nervous about data transfer over a slip ring while spinning. The LED matrix's data transmission is so sensitive, even a momentary disconnect can make all the LEDs light up in garbled random colors. To resolve this, I decided to borrow an idea from Mixila's display, and put the processor with the LED matrix on the spinning part of the display, giving us an uninterrupted connection to the LED matrix. The only use for the slip rings being to power the processor and the LED matrix. Now, most of the slip rings rated for 500 RPM cost as much as $30 or more. which goes against my poor and unemployed student lifestyle. So instead I pondered, I researched, and I modeled. Ladies and gentlemen, I present the most brain-dead solution to a problem I have ever had. If slip ring don't go fast enough, just use 2 of them.
And that's had the desired effect. He's confused Kasparov's pieces there, some of them wondering if gravity's been reversed. One of the pawns has fainted. Oh, bishop there, vomiting out of pure confusion. So a good move there.
Okay, so hang in with me here. 250 RPM is the norm for cheap slip rings. So if we just buy 2 of them, what the fuck? And stack our anime waifu branded slip rings on top of each other, we should be able to achieve 500 RPM without pushing the slip rings past their rating. The idea is to use the bottom slip ring like normal at 250 RPM, but connects its 250 RPM output wires directly to the base of the next one. This way, the entire slip ring on top has a static RPM of 250 without even doing anything. Now here's the trick. We can then spin the output of the top slip ring at 250 RPM relative to its base, but since its base is already spinning at 250 RPM, it'll actually be spinning at 500 RPM. This is kind of confusing, but this basically lets us split the rotation speed between the 2 slip rings. Now all we need is a few gears to make sure that every 2 rotations of the output of the top slip ring results in a single rotation of the base of that slip ring, and the output of the bottom slip ring. This is why the display has so many gears. Now that we've got that sorted out, we need to deal with actually powering this thing. I found this relatively cheap 25 watt 5 volt power supply on AliExpress, which I cut up, giving me a nice place to eventually solder onto. I actually did buy a nice plug adapter for this, but I lost it. So we're making this look even more like a bomb than it already does. This power supply can provide the 5 amps of current that the LED matrix should need to run at full brightness with all LEDs. And while that's not really required for this project, it allowed me to fool around a bit when just playing videos.
Oh god.
Room is bright. Jesus has come to our room in the form of Bad Apple. Now some of you may have noticed that the slip rings I showed on AliExpress only allowed a maximum of 2 amps per wire. This isn't an issue though, since I could just buy a slip ring with more channels and group them together in groups of 3. This was also nice because it meant if a slip ring does experience wear, and one of its channels begins to disconnect occasionally during rotation, the other 2 will keep power flowing uninterrupted. Now that that's sorted, we've really done the hardest parts. All that's left now is to give the ESP32 processor a way to know when it starts a new rotation and measure how fast it's going. For this, I decided to add a magnet. There's this cool thing called a reed switch that has 2 very close iron contacts that normally don't touch, but when you put a magnet close to it, it magnetizes the contacts, making them attract and bend towards each other, closing the circuit. If we put one of these somewhere that's spinning and add a static magnet underneath it, we can create something like a basic encoder, allowing us to write code to detect and respond to when the reed switch passes over the magnet. If we count the total number of pulses and divide by the total time that has elapsed since the processor booted up, we can calculate our average rotations per second, which by multiplying by the time since we last passed the magnet, allows us to estimate at what point we are at in the rotation, and display the correct slice of the 3D model. I'll go more into how we get these slices soon, but for now this is really just the main math that this little processor does. Now back to the mechanical parts. We need a motor to spin this thing. I happened to build a few RC planes a few years back, so I just grabbed a beat up motor from one of those and put a gear on it. No. I mean, it's kinda dumb that our volumetric display technically has a nose cone, and a damaged one at that, but whatever. Extra $15 for my college fund. All the electronics to spin this are straight out of an RC plane, minus the servo tester I'm using to manually set the speed of the motor without a radio transmitter. This does mean I'm using a plane battery to power the spinning motion of this display, but in my defense, I don't have a good non-sketchy way to measure how much current this uses to buy a 12 volt power supply able to provide the same current as the battery. Also, did I mention I hate spending money? This is good enough for a proof of concept. If you ever want to build this yourself, you're going to need to take a chance when buying a power supply, since I've never tested it with one. Hi. It's been almost a year since I recorded and edited all that, and I unfortunately didn't finish it before summer, and then first year engineering came, beat me up, stole all my money, and made my schedule look like this. I hope I edited that in. Supposedly first year engineering is the hardest, so now that that's over with, I'll be trying to post videos more frequently. I have a couple projects I'm currently working on, which I'll be posting updates on my new Patreon. I will also be posting all the 3D print files and code for this project for free. But if you do want to support the channel, that would be a great help, as this costs an immense amount of time, and I am not monetized on YouTube yet, and I don't have money now that university started. So if you want to help fund my next project, please. Okay, now it's time to actually create the visuals we'll be showing. And this is definitely the jankiest part of it all. First, we need a model, for which I made this little janky wireframe cube in Blender. Now, to turn this 3D model into 2D slices, I'm sure there are some advanced math things you can do here, but instead, my 2 remaining brain cells decided to make a shader in Blender to create this crappy looking 2D slice, which looks horrible, but I can clean it up in post. Now, all I do is rotate this cube while rendering, and then I use this little post-processing Python script to turn all these into 16 by 16 images and store them in a C++ file for the microprocessor to use. That's right, instead of doing something smart like compression or an SD card, this processor just dumbly holds an uncompressed array of pixel values in its memory. This is probably too much detail for this video, but the advantage of doing it in this way is that we can set up all the pixels into the format that the LED matrix expects before we start displaying the image, meaning we can just feed them in without the processor doing too much extra work every time it refreshes. Now here's my biggest mistake with this build. When I was reading the specs for the data rate of this LED matrix, I read 800 kilobytes, meaning there would be 6.4 million binary digits being passed between the LED matrix and the ESP32 per second. The problem is though, this is the symbol for kilobytes, and the symbol I actually saw was for kilobits. This tiny difference means that the data transfer rate is actually 8 times slower than I thought, meaning we only get a refresh every 16 degrees instead of every 2 degrees at 500 RPM. Now you might be asking, why is that a problem? Well, if we can't update this fast enough, then we can't use this effectively at a higher RPM. The image starts to blur more and more as the speed increases, reducing our image quality. This was a big blow to this project, which I can't really fix without spending a lot of money for new parts. But as a proof of concept, this project has been quite successful. There are still a lot of things I can do with this display, which I haven't even touched here, such as color and animation. The code on the ESP32 can easily support any combination of colors for the LEDs in its current state, but I lack the Blender knowledge to actually create a proper 2D slice shader which accounts for color. Since I'm releasing all of these files for free, some of you smarter ones can actually implement this yourself, as well as maybe fix my crappy code while you're at it. There really are tons of possibilities with this device, which don't require any additional parts. So if you make something cool, email me a video link so I can maybe mention it in the next video. Anyway, this is the end of the video, so now I'll just play some test footage for you guys, and if you did enjoy this video, please support my channel either through YouTube or through Patreon. It does mean a lot, and it helps keep me motivated and keep posting these. So thank you for watching. Hey, you can see the LEDs underneath. Is now a good time to mention don't try this at home unless you're like, you know, safe with it? Maybe a bit more than me. Don't have a little knob that you can just accidentally rotate in the wrong direction. And instead of turning it off, it just knocks it out.